This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories.
More leaders than ever before have now signed up to protect our forests.
A breakthrough on tackling global warming with COP26 deals on deforestation and cutting methane.
Our other headlines in the black as the world charts a course away from fossil fuels. Oil giant BP reports a big rise in profits.
France and Britain agree to keep talking after stepping back from threats over disputed post-Brexit fishing rights.
And a desperate search for survivors after a high-rise building collapses in Nigeria. Stopping deforestation and cutting methane emissions. Two significant announcements from Glasgow as the United Nations COP26 climate summit continues.
More than 100 countries have agreed to stop deforestation by 2030. Meanwhile, nearly 90 leaders have agreed to cut their country's methane emissions by 30% by 2030.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent Andrew Wilson in Glasgow for us. Andrew, just how significant is this announcement on deforestation?
I think, Jamie, all things considered, and this has been an expected announcement, but it's a pretty impressive win. It's got a lot of backing, a lot of countries behind it, particularly important Indonesia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Brazil, the home of these equatorial or tropical rainforests, which this bill is concentrated on. It's a two-pronged approach, not only to prevent any more clearing or much clearing of these rainforests, but also to go after the consumer end of things in the developed economies. People putting pressure on companies to provide them with more unsustainable beef, more unsustainable soya, and more unsustainable palm oil. So the private sector as well is getting involved. There's billions of dollars being pledged towards putting this right. And it's if you consider that even at the G20 conference a few days ago, Jair Bolsonaro was still touting the idea of Donald Trump's trillion tree idea, which is cut it all down and then plant new ones, which of course ecologically, in terms of ecosystems, simply doesn't work. This has got some real teeth behind it. Joe Biden very happy to announce it. He's got to run it past Congress, of course, but it's being treated as the big win as far as COP26 is concerned. And all these COPs have needed something to get the momentum going at the beginning, something to show the delegates that it is worth showing up. There'll be something to talk about.
Not the only win today, because progress elsewhere. What more can you tell us about this global methane pledge?
This is European Union and US deal on methane. It's what Ursula von der Leyen has described as low-hanging fruit, which I think perhaps is true to an extent, but nonetheless it is a pretty big deal in terms of the numbers. Now, this is the reliance here is on America to make these cuts mostly. A third of the global methane, a third of global warming comes from methane emissions from around the world. So to reduce that in any meaningful sense will certainly contribute to the overall picture, regardless of carbon dioxide. Methane also has a very immediate effect on the atmosphere, so it starts to contribute to heating as soon as it's released and then dissipates after a couple of decades. What that means is if you do start cutting methane emissions in meaningful ways, you'll see results straight away. Scientists are talking about perhaps 0.2 degrees, so if they're trying to shift from 2.7 down to 1.5, 0.2 will be a welcome help towards that. It's mostly going to be concentrated in the States. There's about 300,000 oil and gas rigs over there. There's quite a few more abandoned rigs that are still leaking methane. Joe Biden needs to go after those. But after he's done that, he's going to want to go after countries like Iran and Russia and China, also gas producers, and start welcoming them to join the deal and see if they can't really cut emissions even further beyond 2030.
Andrew Wilson in Glasgow, thank you very much.
So, two major agreements among world leaders on day 2 of COP26, but there was also disappointment as India, the world's third biggest polluter, announced a distant net zero target of 2070. CGTN's Narendra Modi has been looking at the day's events.
It's the first major breakthrough of the COP26 climate summit. More than 100 countries signing up to a pledge to stop and reverse deforestation by 2030. In total, the nations involved cover 85% of the world's forests.
More leaders than ever before have now signed up to protect our forests, from countries in the north and the south with temperate forests, tropical forests, and including nations like China, Russia, Brazil, some of the largest forest estates in the world.
Greener policies will need money. More than $19 billion has been pledged from both governments and the private sector to help save forests. From one Amazon to another, one of the world's richest men, Jeff Bezos, fresh from his exploits in space, has pledged $2 billion, saying businesses must play their role in paying for the cleanup.
Looking back at Earth from up there, the atmosphere seems so thin, the world so finite and so fragile.
Much of the new funding will go towards helping developing countries, among them India. Its leader, Narendra Modi, says his country will be net zero by 2070. That's 20 years later than this summit is calling for. He's announced a new scheme to help island nations combat climate change, along with his British and Australian counterparts.
All of us are here because we believe in fair and practical action to address climate change. We're here because we're family, particularly amongst our Pacific family.
Meanwhile, China's climate envoy, who's leading the country's delegation, said a lot of progress has been made.
For the past 8 years, China has been the world leader in terms of investments in renewable energy and accounts for a third of the global total installed capacity. Because of our efforts, the cost of renewables has come down and is now competitive compared to conventional energy sources.
Many of the rich and powerful will be moving on from Scotland after day 2, leaving their officials behind to work out the finer details. Despite the new pledges trickling in, critics say the plans don't go far enough. As world leaders gathered inside, protests continued across Glasgow. There's certainly some action on climate change here, but the key question still hangs over this summit and humanity. Will it be enough? Nawid Jabarkil, CGTN, London.
Well, Sandrine Dixon de Clèves is co-president of Club of Rome, a Swiss non-profit organisation that focuses on solutions to global emergencies. I asked her about the significance of the COP26 pledge to save the world's forests.
It's significant because what we're seeing is it's the first time that we actually have very large countries such as the US, but also Russia and China, and actually Brazil as well, pledging to truly stop deforestation by 2030. So it's both the number of countries, more than 100, it's the size of the countries, and then it's actually the amount of money, the capital flow, both from private and public sector funds that are going towards not only deforestation, but a series of other activities so that we ensure that we protect and we regenerate our forests.
Separately, I think it's more than 90 countries have now agreed to try to reduce methane emissions. China, Russia and India have not signed up to this. That's pretty disappointing, presumably. How significant and how useful is this agreement?
Well, this is why we need all of these different agreements to complement each other, and clearly the reduction of methane is fundamental. It's fundamental because we truly need to shift out of gas. We need to make sure that actually our refineries and our gas producers are reducing the methane in there. In the past, we've had many agreements, but here the fact that some of the major countries are not agreeing to methane reduction when we know that it's such an important short-term greenhouse gas is truly disappointing. So again, this is what happens at COPs. You get some of these incredible commitments that are really setting the tone for hope, and then you get some of these other commitments that you are hopeful will bring in some of the big countries that don't. We need to continue to hold those countries accountable and bring them on board so that they do sign.
Ahead of this COP26, you said you were pessimistic about outcomes. You're there soaking up the atmosphere, listening to the mood music. I wonder, has your position changed? How do you see this COP?
Let's just say that I remain still on the fence. I do think that we're seeing optimism in today's announcements, as I said, with regard to forestry. You know, in terms of the scale and also the speed, we're saying that this is a decisive decade. So the fact that we have one of the most monumental commitments coming from so many countries that are truly going to try to make a difference by 2030 and reverse the huge impact we've had on forests, that is fundamental. But then we know that actually to reach 1.5, we need more commitments in terms of our NDCs that are truly moving the bar, and they're not. So coming out of COP, we know that there are many ways in which we're not going to reach our 1.5 commitment, and we also know that the $100 billion and translating that into an annual figure for those developing countries and those countries that need it the most to truly shift is still not coming either. So we're going to have to translate those key actions into something that's tangible by the end of COP, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that. But the forestry commitments do get us some way to where we need to go.
The EU's chief, Ursula von der Leyen, is urging world leaders to put a price on carbon. I wonder, how would those carbon markets work, and realistically, is that going to be signed off there?
So we've been calling for a price for carbon for a very long time, and clearly the EU are one of the first that put in place the emissions trading scheme. We also obviously have California and so many other countries that have started to truly put a price on carbon. When we've seen that in Europe, actually, the price has systematically gone up and is the highest it's ever been. But to join it up as an international price of carbon that works in terms of market forces is going to take some more work. Working continuously with the Chinese that have also launched their market, and bringing in so many other countries that for the moment have not committed. This would be a game breaker if we were able to truly get an international carbon market agreement. We've already got the World Bank, and we've got many of the MDBs that have been supporting this move. So I think everyone is ready. But to be frank, we've been waiting for this for more than 10 years. If we do it here, then that will be one of the major commitments alongside forestry that we could really hope for.
Well, another goal of COP26 is reducing coal burning. India is heavily dependent on the industry. Around 70% of its total electricity is provided by 135 coal-fired power stations.
But surging demand and high global prices have led to shortages, with some states cutting power for up to 14 hours a day. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has pledged to move to 50% renewables by 2030. But for now, coal mining and coal burning is still being ramped up. Ravinder Bawa reports.
In India, these days, coal supply to power generation plants is being ramped up at a war footing. Fears of blackouts made headlines last month, forcing the government to scale up production up to 2 million tons per day. As the economy recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic, coupled with supply issues have led to the current coal shortage.
It is the inventory shortage which was become critical. And the reason is due to basically forecasting and related inventory management problem. It's a short-term it is short-term problem.
70% of countries' electricity is generated using coal. For India to commit to achieving net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050 would mean saying no to coal now.
Even by 2050 scenario, we will be depending on 40% or more power requirement from coal. So we cannot say today no to coal till we don't have a hydrogen technology well within our reach available.
While the government faces the challenge to increase electricity production 3 times in the next decade, anti-mining protests are becoming louder. Indigenous communities are battling to protect their homes and local environments from the mining industry.
They have not asked us and are taking forward the allocation of coal mining blocks illegally. The villagers are scared for their lives, but still they're fighting the might of the government and the corporates.
Many such fights for lives and livelihoods have now moved to the courts. Experts say the struggle to meet the coal demand to prevent any blackouts in the country will continue for another 6 months before supplies become stable. Ravindra Bawa, CGTN, Delhi.
Well, Serbia is another country that won't be ditching coal anytime soon. The President, Alexander Vucic, spoke to CGTN's Jang Nini and told her why he's not prepared to give up coal.
We cannot oblige ourselves to something that we cannot deliver on. And if I would say, okay, we are going to phase out coal within 2-3 years, I would be a liar. We cannot do it. And I'm not going to pledge for that. I'm not going to promise it to anyone. Because we need electricity power in our country. Well, what do you want us to say to our people that, okay, dear friends and our dear compatriots, our dear citizens, now you don't have any more electricity because we are phasing out coal. No, it's something that we need to find a compromising solution between green energy and also all the other our needs that we have to fulfill. And that's it, which is not an easy task. When people start speaking about climate, it's something that is far away from us in real terms, which is not, which is closer than ever. And we need to start resolving it, but we need to do it in a serious and responsible way, not lying to each other and not pronouncing words from fairy tales, nice stories, because there are no nice stories. It can be only a nice end, and I hope that it might happen.
So China obviously has put forward its own climate change.
Yes.
A
very ambitious one. Very ambitious one. Very ambitious one, and but okay, China has enough resources to do so, and I am very much satisfied with that because there are important investments, Chinese investments in our country, and they have already started tackling these issues. Let's say company Hebei from the province Hebei, which is an owner of our steel mill in Smederevo city close to Belgrade, they took all necessary measures to secure good environment, green environment for all our citizens. It's the same with our Zijin copper mine in East Serbia, which means that whatever you do in China, it has its impact in Serbia as well. And we are great friends, and we'll watch very closely what you do. We'll try to take some ways or means of dealing with this stuff from you and to learn a bit more, and I'm satisfied if you are doing that in a very proper way. And when Chinese president says that he's going to deliver on that, I know that he's going to do it.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. France and the UK step back from a bitter fishing row, agreeing to continue talking.
Climate change is happening right now. World leaders prepare for vital talks that will change the course of humanity. Action could save millions of lives. Failure could cost many more. Do they have the will to act quickly? Does the planet have the time to wait? Follow full coverage from the COP26 climate talks here on CGTN.
Around the world, citizens and reporters have joined our Zero Waste Challenge to examine how green their lifestyles, cultures and government really are. See their video diaries, fascinating insights and local solutions as they try to achieve zero waste. That's #Zero Waste Challenge on social media and online at cgtn.com/Europe.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. And a quick reminder, CGTN is available to watch for free on all of the major digital platforms. And you can now watch CGTN live anytime, wherever you are, on the News Player Plus app. We're also available on europe.cgtn.com and in the UK on Preview.
The post-Brexit feud between France and the UK over fishing rights is showing some signs of calm after the storm. President Emmanuel Macron has postponed trade sanctions on the UK so negotiators can work on new proposals.
But the British vessel at the centre of this dispute remains in the hands of French authorities, despite claims that it had been released earlier. Well, in a moment, our correspondent Ross Cullen in Paris. But first, let's talk to CGTN's Michael Voss in London. Michael, just how did two neighbours get into a mess like this?
Well, it's a poorly written Brexit treaty which says that French fishermen can continue to fish in British waters, providing they can show they've done so in the past. The problem is the treaty doesn't say how to prove that. The big fishing vessels, the trawlers, all have GPS. The smaller ones, often family boats, don't, and some of them at best have written records. And it's these French fishermen which are at the heart of the dispute. For the moment, it's fishing as usual, though no one knows whether the bitter dispute between France and Britain will be resolved or escalate into a damaging economic trade war. France had threatened to close its ports to British fishermen after the UK denied licences to fish in its waters to a number of small French vessels. Britain threatened retaliations of its own. It was a row which had the potential to overshadow the UN climate conference, but late on Monday, France's President Macron announced that the threat was on hold. Britain welcomed the de-escalation and made conciliatory statements of its own.
We've always been clear that we're open to further dialogue on that, and that if there's new evidence that can be brought to bear, then obviously we would consider that. We want to licence any vessel that qualifies under the terms of the agreement we reached a year ago.
The island of Jersey, the British dependency in the English Channel at the centre of the row, announced that it had issued another 49 licences to French fishermen. But in the French fishing port of Granville, no one is sure how the talks will progress.
During the last negotiations, there were 49 licences granted. It's not enough. There are still 200 boats pending. It's nothing at all. 49 licences.
We don't know what to expect. We learn new things every day. We don't know if we have the right to fish or not. For the moment, we have a licence, but others are still waiting for it. We will not give up until everyone has obtained a licence.
There is another outstanding issue which remains unresolved, with the impounded British fishing vessel still being held at a French port, despite earlier reports it would be released. Four-way talks between Britain, France, Jersey and the European Union will get underway on Thursday. This is much more a political rather than a trade dispute. Getting tough on the French plays well with much of the base of Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, while standing up to the British goes down well in France, particularly ahead of an election year. But it's these French fishermen, this small trade dispute with a small number of French fishermen, which really risks getting out of hand.
Michael Voss, thank you very much.
Well, let's head to Paris now for the French side of the story. Ross Cullen is following that for us. So, Ross, what are the French saying?
Well, just to pick up on what Michael was saying there, the issue of supporting French fishermen is important, but it is far outshadowed in an election year. We're counting down to April 2022 for the presidential election by issues such as immigration, the future of Europe, pensions here in France, support for the green recovery, recovering from the pandemic. So standing up and standing tough to the British really is something that the French are tired of now. They believe that Brexit has been done, and they believe that the British should get on with their deal that they have managed to secure. They should get on with their life outside the European Union. So it's not that major a topic when it comes to the list of presidential election themes. Certainly the submarine crisis going on at the moment and the leak of text messages between Emmanuel Macron and Scott Morrison at international diplomatic level, that's something that might be seen as a bigger issue. When it comes to fishing, though, it is still a big issue symbolically, because France has 3,500 kilometres of coastline. Britain is an island, and so both nations between the European Union and United Kingdom, both sides do want to be tough to support those coastal communities, despite the fact that fishing contributes just 0.06% of France's income, 0.1% for Britain. So small economically, but big symbolically. In terms of the next steps, we heard from Thursday here in Paris, The UK's Brexit minister, Lord Frost, here in the French capital to speak to France's Europe minister, Clémence Beaune, also representatives from Brussels and Jersey. The Jersey's an interesting one. It's just off the coast of Normandy, but not in the EU, not in the UK, but still playing maybe a big role in this, despite being a small island. So in terms of what Emmanuel Macron has said on the sidelines of the climate change conference in Glasgow, saying that we will not be imposing any sanctions while negotiations are ongoing, speaking today to communities up in the north and the coast of Normandy, they were saying to us that they are waiting for the end of these negotiations to see if there is any movement from either side. But it is something that we will be paying close attention to on Thursday.
Ross Cullen in Paris, thank you.
At least 25 people have been killed in Afghanistan in an attack on Kabul's largest military hospital. Gunfire was heard after two separate explosions. Taliban officials said 4 gunmen were killed and 1 was captured.
Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has exercised his right not to answer questions as he appeared as a witness in the trial of his former aides. They're accused of misusing public funds on polling contracts. Sarkozy, who has presidential immunity, says the decision to summon him was unconstitutional and disproportionate.
Ethiopia has declared a state of emergency after forces from the northern region of Tigray announced they were gaining territory and considering marching on the capital, Addis Ababa. The government has called on residents to register weapons and be prepared to defend their neighbourhoods amid fears of a rebel advance on the city.
Former FIFA President Sepp Blatter and his ex-UEFA counterpart Michel Platini have been charged with fraud in Switzerland. It follows a 6-year investigation into a payment of $2.2 million from FIFA to French football legend Platini for his advisory services, authorised by Blatter. The two men could now face a trial within months.
3 Chinese nationals who were kidnapped in Mali have been rescued after escaping their captors. The construction workers were picked up by ground and air forces on Monday, a day after their escape.
Since the incident, the Chinese Foreign Ministry and China's embassy to Mali have closely followed developments of the case, continued to work with the Malian side, urged Mali to fully carry out a safe rescue and guided the relevant enterprises on how to respond appropriately. Through the joint efforts of various parties, the 3 abductees were safely rescued on the 1st of November and are currently in a good physical condition.
Search and rescue workers are combing through rubble in the Nigerian city of Lagos after a 21-storey building collapsed. At least 16 people have been confirmed dead, but there are fears that that number could rise.
The luxury high-rise was under construction at the time, and witnesses say dozens of workers are still missing. Deji Badamosi reports.
This is the very moment the 21-storey building suddenly collapsed, captured on the phone of an eyewitness. Among the first responders were people living and walking around the area. It took almost 2 hours before emergency services got to the scene, and not long after, bodies began to emerge from the site.
We are going to make sure that we rescue everybody trapped here. That's why the government has asked for more, has asked for more apparatus from other agencies, so to come in now to assist. So all the rescue agencies are here from the federal, so from the states, and other agencies are assisting.
It's still not exactly known how many persons may be trapped under the rubble there, but some eyewitness account put the number at about 50. The emergency authorities are not confirming any figure yet. They say they would be able to do that after the rubble has been cleared. It's still not known what could have caused the collapse, and even though building collapse is quite common here, this is the very first time in the history of this city that a building of this magnitude would collapse. Several questions will no doubt be asked of the building authority in the state in the coming days. Deji Badimasi, CGTN, Lagos.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, all eyes may be on COP26 and the green agenda, but away from the cameras, oil giant BP sees third-quarter profits surge to over $3 billion.
It's the first day in Germany that vaccination centers like this one are offering a third jab.
There are fears there could be a fifth wave of COVID-19 cases.
Market watchers have a keen eye on infection rates,
Safety and efficacy of COVID-19 shots.
France closed schools in the first lockdown in spring last year.
France has been a leader in vaccinating youngsters.
If a spike necessitates another lockdown,
Italy is now close to reaching its target of immunising 80% of the population over the age of 12.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top story, a breakthrough on tackling global warming with COP26 deals on deforestation and cutting methane.
Former US Vice President Al Gore has said that China and the United States have potential to work together on climate change. The politician turned climate activist was speaking to reporters on the fringes of the COP26 summit in Glasgow.
China and the U.S. can work together constructively, and in spite of disagreements on other issues, climate is an opportunity for both countries to work together.
Meanwhile, a powerful message from the president of Palai to the COP26 summit. Sir Angle Whipps Jr. says his Pacific state of 500 low-lying islands is under grave threat from rising sea levels, and he's demanding urgent action from the world's industrial powers.
Frankly speaking, there is no dignity to a slow and painful death. You might as well bomb our islands instead of making us suffer only to witness our slow and fateful demise. Leaders of the G20, we are drowning, and our only hope is the life ring you are holding.
Well, they may be small, but they have a big part to play in tackling climate change. Miyawaki forests are small jungles which are incredibly dense and biodiverse. They're springing up around Europe to preserve nature and tackle climate change. Tony Waterman reports.
Along the outer rim of this office park outside Brussels, a mini forest is growing.
When we planted it a year and a half ago, it was only knee-high.
Now the trees tower overhead, growing at an impressive rate of 1 meter every year.
See what it's like from within.
Enter inside and the smell of soil and the buzzing bees flood the senses as the highway nearby fades into silence.
The natural dynamic of the forest to turn from a lawn to a lush forest. That's a process that takes about 200 years. With this methodology, we plant everything at once, and we speed up the process, and in 20 years, we'll get a very similar result.
So 20 years, a 200-year-old forest.
Exactly. It's 10 times faster. That's the whole idea.
The idea of growing a centuries-old forest at warp speed was the life's work of the famous Japanese botanist Akira Miyawaki, from whom these mini forests get their name. The forests pack a powerful ecological punch. 30 times denser than a natural forest, they can store 40 times more carbon and contain up to 20 times more biodiversity. Nicolas de Brabander, himself a biologist, has adapted the Miyawaki method to Belgium's unique climate and terrain. 26 different species are planted in this 300 square meter patch alone. The cramped living quarters, the genesis of that rapid growth, as each tree fights to reach the sunlight first.
We talk a lot about biodiversity, but we don't know what to do. That's an example of what we can do. It's really to create an ecosystem, very diverse.
Besides offering shelter, these mini forests also provide cool shade and filter harmful pollutants out of the air. Nicolas has so far installed 30 Miyawaki forests in Belgium, at businesses, schools, even private residences like this one. Planted just 4 years ago, it has the look and feel of a decades-old forest.
So we're really creating habitat for biodiversity. We hear birds chirping in the background. Deers come here in the evening. You have mushrooms growing in the falls. Lots of insects also.
Nicolas says these urban forests alone won't solve the problem of biodiversity loss or climate change. Rather, he hopes they will serve as models.
The idea of this forest is really to create an emotion. When we touch the heart, it really triggers a change inside everyone.
A mini forest with big dreams. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Louvain-la-Neuve.
Ecuador has announced it'll expand its Galapagos Marine Reserve by an additional 60,000 square kilometres. It's already one of the largest in the world, but it'll now extend into key feeding and migration areas for a number of endangered species. The president says his commitments are inspired by younger generations fighting climate change.
My youngest grandson is 10. 3 or 4 years ago, he said, "Grandad, don't use plastic straws." From that point on, I've only used straws made of paper or cardboard. No more plastic.
While the focus of the world's attention is on the Global Climate Summit in Glasgow, latest figures show that oil companies are still enjoying bumper returns. BP says that underlying profits rose to $3.3 billion in the third quarter, ahead of analysts' expectations. Well, that compares with just 86 million a year ago, when energy demand and prices collapsed during the pandemic. Well, let's talk now to Nick Coleman, who is senior editor at Oil News. Thanks very much indeed for being with us on the programme today. So perhaps not really that surprising that BP's profits are up, given high gas and oil prices. But are these results as strong as the headline suggests?
So you're right. Clearly, the oil price is up 70% from the same time a year ago. So all of these companies are benefiting. It is a generally positive picture for BP. They are now starting to recover from the pandemic. You're going to see probably production increasing, but it was a slightly mixed picture. They had a bit of a hangover, if you like, from Hurricane Ida in the United States, which did deplete their production. There's a lot of maintenance going on at oil fields, certainly in the last sort of 3 months or so, which depleted their production again. I think perhaps some investors didn't really like the hit that they took in terms of their reported earnings as a result of some hedging of LNG prices.
Well, let's talk about COP26. Everybody is, of course. Is BP behind, though, when it comes to transitioning to renewable energies? It's what's on everybody's minds, but BP, of course, heavily focused on fossil fuels.
It is, but BP has endeared itself to some extent with environmentalists. believe it or not, by saying that it expects to reduce its oil and gas production by 40% by 2030 as it replaces, if you like, that energy production with new low-carbon energy forms such as renewables. So in some ways, it is actually pleasing the environmentalists by saying explicitly that we will deliver reductions in our oil and gas output.
BP is also saying, though, that global oil demand is back above 100 million barrels a day. This can't be good for the long-term outlook for fossil fuel demand.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really not compatible with the kind of climate pledges and the climate targets which are being discussed in Glasgow this week. Of course, you could say that some of this is a little bit bumpy. These statistics we're getting at the moment, economic statistics, are quite kind of erratic and volatile because of the kind of bounce back we're seeing after the pandemic. So, you know, whether this level of demand will be sustained in the longer term is a little bit uncertain. There is a lot of volatility around, but it's definitely not compatible with the lower carbon targets which, you know, everybody's talking about in Glasgow.
So with these increased profits we're seeing, what's the incentive for BP to move away from fossil fuels towards renewables?
So I guess there's two answers. Firstly is investor pressure. I mean, BP has a shareholder base, you know, quite strongly in the United Kingdom and comes under a lot of pressure from investors, people like pension funds who want to see, you know, a switch to lower carbon energy, and frankly also from the British government. Obviously, BP is a listed company, it's not owned by the British government, but there is a kind of moral pressure there, which is perhaps a bit unique to BP. So those are two answers. I think actually BP would also say it makes good business to be diversifying so that you're not solely dependent on oil. After all, oil is a very volatile commodity. And if possible, you want to diversify your risk. They are forecasting big increases in gas demand around the world, including demand for liquefied natural gas sold to places like China or India, as those countries switch away from coal. And BP would argue that there's a very good justification, in a way, for increasing the gas supply to those countries in order to, if you like, wean them off coal.
Nick Coleman from Oil News, thanks very much indeed for talking to us today.
Not at all. Thank you.
US President Joe Biden is continuing to hit stumbling blocks in his efforts to pass a multi-billion-dollar economic stimulus package. Now concern is growing in his own Democratic Party that the planned infrastructure bill is just too big and too costly. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. John, bring us up to date here. What is the state of play on Biden's domestic spending plan?
Hey, Jamie. Hey, Robin. Great program so far, by the way, on COP26. I've loved every second of it. And, of course, I've been watching with great interest because Mr. Biden is indeed over there in Glasgow with you guys at the moment. And he's talking about global warming in Scotland. But here, back at home, in his home territory, things are really heating up, truly, regarding his domestic spending agenda. And it's his signature spending agenda as well. And things at this moment are really not going too well. Let me remind our viewers what's happening. On the table, we have a $1.2 trillion basic infrastructure package. It's sitting in the House waiting to be voted on. It's been there for the last 3 months. Coming up behind it in the Senate, a much larger spending package, which we think of as the Build Back Better plan or the Human Infrastructure Plan. And it has things in it like healthcare and climate change and childcare and all that sort of stuff. And it is worth $1.75 trillion. Now, Senator Joe Manchin, who our viewers around the world won't necessarily know, but he is a senator from the coal state of West Virginia, and he surprised everybody within the last 24 hours by saying that he wasn't prepared to vote on that bigger package. Everybody thought that he was going to, and he said, no, I'm not prepared to because I have doubts about the cost and the consequences of all this. Now, what's new here is that at the weekend, the Democratic Party let it be known, and cable news went absolutely ballistic about this, saying the Democrats have got it in the bag, there's going to be a vote on Tuesday, and of course that vote is now not going to happen. Nancy Pelosi, who is the Democrat Speaker of the House, is suggesting right now that there may be a vote on both of these bills by Thursday. I have to say I have my doubts about that, because Joe Manchin has already been recorded on video camera, on cell phone camera, walking the halls of the Congress, saying that he thinks it's all going to take much longer than that. So it is a stalemate regarding the president's big signature bill. And those who are progressive within the party are standing up for their corner, but they're also holding their boss, the president, essentially to ransom. Guys?
And, John, this is absolutely knife-edge politics, isn't it? One, possibly two Democrats could delay or derail this agenda.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, in one way, I have to say that this is the American system. I mean, people don't realize it's all built around no one person, even the president, getting too much power. I mean, that is the system, and the system is kind of working. And you have to just hand it to the progressives. They are holding out because they're not getting what they want, and they're fighting their corner. But knife edge is a good way of putting it. Think of it as a battle between the moderates, like Joe Manchin, and the progressives in the party. Now, Manchin is demanding a vote on the smaller $1.2 trillion package. He wants that to happen because it's been sitting in the House for the last 3 months. But the progressives are saying, no, 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 no. We want to hold out for you to sign on for the $1.75 trillion human bill and spend even more money if possible. Now, what's in that is climate change, pre-K, childcare, and hearing money, out, paid family leave, free 2-year college education, and vision and dental is not included in the bill as it stands at the moment. Now, just finally to finish off, there are 2 gubernatorial races taking place in America today. It's election day here, New Jersey, and the much tighter one in the state of Virginia, just south of Washington, D.C., and the outcome of that, if the Republicans win, particularly in Virginia, that is likely to determine how big these bills are, when the votes are, and set the tone for the much more important congressional elections coming up next year. Guys?
Very quickly, in 4 seconds, in fact, more closing records and strong earnings today.
I love you. I really do. Okay. 3 records last night. The S&P 500, its 60th, 6-0 this year, and the Nasdaq led up by Tesla, which was up 50% in the month of October. Pfizer earnings very strong, sales very strong. The vaccine's bringing them $36 billion, they say, in this year, 2021. And right now, the Dow is trading above 36,000. It wasn't 4 seconds, but it was as close as I can get. I can't do it quicker than that.
It was 15 seconds of brilliance. John Terrett in New York, thank you very much.
The cancellations affecting American Airlines flights have continued into a 4th day, with 400 disrupted services. Almost 2,500 flights have been affected since Friday. Severe weather caused the initial problems, but staff shortages have also played a part after airlines encouraged thousands of staff to quit during the pandemic. 2/3 of cancellations on Sunday were due to a lack of flight attendants.
The world's largest shipping group has warned that there's no end in sight for the global supply chain squeeze. Maersk, whose third quarter operating profits of $5.9 billion were the most profitable in their history, says congestion outside ports is getting worse. The Danish giant says with manufacturers struggling to keep up with demand, delays will continue into the first quarter of 2022.
Tesla has recalled almost 12,000 vehicles over concerns that a software glitch could increase the risk of a crash. The car maker says a communication error between 2 onboard chips could see the vehicle's emergency brakes activated without warning. The recall applies to some models sold in the United States between 2017 and 2021.
Tottenham Hotspur Football Club have appointed the former Chelsea and Inter Milan manager Antonio Conte as their new head coach. The initial deal until summer 2023 is reportedly worth almost $18 million a year. Conte won the Premier League in his first season with Chelsea.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Staying with football, the footballer Thierry Henry headlines at Portugal's Web Summit, tackling online hate.
of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. The former footballing legend Thierry Henry was the star turn at Portugal's Web Summit in Lisbon.
Social responsibility, sustainable development and the fight against online hate were all being tackled. Rahul Pathak reports.
Tens of thousands of delegates and guests have descended on Lisbon, including some well-known faces. Arguably one of the biggest names at this year's Web Summit 2021 was French football legend Thierry Henry. He was in Lisbon to talk about the disturbing rise of online hate, aimed not just to footballers, but to figures from all walks of life. Under discussion, Britain's new online safety bill proposes prison time for offenders of up to 2 years, and it's legislation that he would certainly welcome.
If you find yourself in a situation like that, or any situation that you can encounter sometime on social media, you will be arrested I'm talking about in the street, obviously. If you do that, you will get arrested by a police officer, or at least tell you to stop, and then you cannot redo it again. But it seems like you can do whatever you want on those platforms at times.
Now, the gentleman that you can see speaking is Patrick Mouratoglou, and he is the coach of tennis superstar Serena Williams, and he's just one of a number of big names alongside Thierry Henry appearing here at Web Summit 2021. The Danish actor Nicholas Coster-Waldau, also better known as Jaime Lannister from the hit TV show Game of Thrones, is also a keynote speaker here, and the plethora of big names from sports to entertainment to politics appearing here in Lisbon is a source of great pride for the hosts.
In recent years, Portugal, and Lisbon specifically, has become popular with digital nomads. The country has positioned itself as an attractive destination with start-up visas available for non-EU residents. The newly elected mayor says he wants to make sure this new boom doesn't create a growing economic disparity.
My dream for Lisbon is that you have to have this aspirational side of the tech world, which is very important, but then as a city you have to use that growth to basically share that growth with the people that have today no aspirations, that they were not privileged to have the education that others have.
Over 42,000 delegates and guests have attended this year, with a keen focus on social responsibility and holding larger companies to account. As the tech industry continues to grow, it's an area that will need to be central to the integrity of this world. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Lisbon.
People across Mexico are commemorating the Day of the Dead festival, one of the country's biggest when people remember loved ones.
Last year, all public events were cancelled due to the pandemic. This year, many will commemorate those who died of coronavirus. CGTN's Frank Contreras reports.
Mexicans spend the first 2 days of November living with the memory of their dearly departed. They create ofrendas, or offerings, with bright orange cempasúchil flowers and photographs of loved ones who've died. Sometimes they're famous, like Mexican portrait artist Frida Kahlo. A used bookstore created a homage to old, forgotten books. A main attraction this year in downtown Mexico City is this special interactive Day of the Dead ofrenda. People come and post photos and pay respect to those who died of COVID-19. This one shows an entire family killed by the virus.
Mexican authorities say more than 288,000 people have died from the COVID-19 virus. For many, that's just a number, and so this memorial is a way of putting a face and giving a history to the people who have died from this disease.
A woman posts a photo of a young man who died in September. He was a photographer about to celebrate his 25th birthday, but COVID vaccines were not available in the town where he lived, so he was never vaccinated.
His name was Luis Armando. He was a son, a brother, and he was my boyfriend. We shared 10 years of incredible love. We lost him a short time ago. It's been a month and a half. Nearly 2 months. This space helps us remember him.
People place notes next to the photos. This one says, "To my beloved husband, I will love you for the rest of my life." And this sticker says, "Mother, you have no idea how much I miss you. I love you." Salvador Alvarez works with the government of Mexico City.
The idea is to give all an opportunity to people who are unable to say goodbye to their loved ones. Here they pay homage and honor their dead because the pandemic never gave them the opportunity to do it in a traditional way.
COVID-19 survivors now have a space where they can process the loss of people dear to them. And the public gets a chance to better understand their sorrow. Frank Contreras, CGTN, Mexico City.
Well, as world leaders in Glasgow grapple with the climate emergency, we've asked viewers around the world to keep video diaries as they attempt to spend a week without creating waste.
Today we're going to Washington, where Zach Dunce has gone shopping for clothes, hoping to make room in his wardrobe without throwing anything away.
Hey everyone, it's me, Zach, again. Today we're going to Goodwill. And the reason we're going here is to do a little bit of shopping. So Goodwill is pretty famous in America for being a place that is mostly 100% profit. The way that it works is people take their old clothes that they don't want anymore and they bring them here to be donated. And then Goodwill sells them back, usually for a much, much cheaper price than what you would get somewhere else. So let's go inside and take a look at what we can find. So this whole section behind me, almost everything you see here, this is all the women's section. There's tons and tons of stuff. Meanwhile, let's go check out the men's. The men's is basically just these three little areas right here. So a lot more stuff for women, but still for men, there's some pretty good stuff.
And to see what Zach did with his old clothes and to learn more about the Zero Waste Challenge, head to our Facebook page.
Well, that's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching. More on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. And
you can now watch CGTN live anytime, wherever you are, on the News Player Plus app. We're also available at europe.cgtn.com and in the UK on Freeview. Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.